The Fabulous 413 podcast is funded by Window World of Western Mass, a local family business with experienced craftsmen offering vinyl, composite, and James Hardie siding. WindowWorldofWesternMA.com.
Welcome to the Fabulous 413. I'm Khalees Smith.
And I'm Monty Belmonte. Later in the show, a new novel looks at the modern problems of Franklin County as we talk with Mattia Kramer about her book, The Untended.
And word nerd Emily Brewster teaches us more about one of my absolute favorite parts of the English language, the German words that do a better job at describing things, so we adopted them entirely.
But first, tonight in Northampton, an innovative improviser brings his take on electronica to the Iron Horse stage.
With a ginormous amount of acknowledgments in tow.
Tonight at the Iron Horse, our next guest plays as part of the Secret Planet series in collaboration with the Parlor Room Collective. John Carroll Kirby is an American pianist, record producer, composer based in LA. As a musician, Kirby's collaborated with a number of huge artists, including Remy Wolf, Solange, Frank Ocean, who my oldest son claims is his secret boyfriend, Miley Cyrus, Norah Jones, Harry Styles, Tyler the Creator, and so many others.
He studied jazz orchestration and composing with John Clayton at the University of Southern California before touring with other artists and making a name for himself as a collaborator. But it wasn't until 2017 that he released his first solo album, Travel. But since then, in addition to the ongoing collaborations across a slew of genres, he's released 9 other albums, including the soundtrack to the movie The Luckiest Man in America earlier this year, and has brought his nostalgic sounds to stages all over the world.
And this evening at 7 p.m., you have a chance to see him weave these atmospheric compositions live on stage at the Iron Horse in Northampton. John Carroll Kirby, welcome to the show.
Thank you for that intro. That was amazing. Forgot about a few of those things.
It's always good a reminder. That's what we do it.
Plus, you've done a lot, and putting out 10 albums, if we include your first album, in 8 years of time is nuts. And that's not counting, again, any of the collaborations that you're a part of. So, if you forget a couple, that's fair.
Yeah, someone asked me to explain what some song was about, and it had this whole story behind it, and I just blanked, and I was like, yeah, I don't know what that one's about. It's just something I came up with. I had, in a previous interview, told this whole other story about it. I felt kind of dumb.
You can think of it as dumb, but it seems like an overarching ethos of what you're doing. I've heard you describe your music in a Guardian article as French cat burglar music, which I think is hilarious and kind of plays into the idea that you're out there improvising a lot, and that gives you an ability to collaborate. In Northampton, John Carroll Kirby, there is a famous Grammy Award-winning member of the Starland vocal band named John Carroll. He happens to also be married to Susan Sarandon's sister. But I was wondering if this was a professional decision that you had to go with John Carroll Kirby as opposed to John Carroll because of John Carroll from the Northampton area, who is part of Starland Vocal Band.
No, John Carroll of Starland Vocal Band, I'm not aware of. I'm looking forward to checking him out. The reason I go by my full name is, well, there's a few John Kirbys out there. There's one jazz bassist from the 20s named John Kirby. And then the other one is like the Pentagon spokesman. And what's kind of messed up about that is that with all that's been going on, that he's been the spokesman for, people tag me on Instagram sometimes, even though my full name's in my handle, they tag me for him, and I've actually been getting like death threats.
Wow.
No.
Yeah, it can be a bit upsetting, but I'm assuming if they took the time to realize that that's not me, they would rescind their death threats and pass them on to the right person.
You should send them some French cat burglar music as a response to it every single time. Improvise around it.
Might calm people down a little.
You've got this wide swath of folks that you've collaborated with, and as we mentioned, across many genres like Frank Ocean, Tyler the Creator, Norah Jones, and Remy Wolf. How do you choose who you collaborate with, or how do they find you to collaborate with you?
That's a good question, and that's really a big part of it, because I do say no to a lot of stuff, and that especially in LA, it kind of feels like a sort of collaboration frenzy sometimes, and people come to LA, from London, New York, wherever, and they just want to book their schedule, and so people try to, sometimes slot me into those type of things, and it's not always the right fit. the two questions I ask are, do I like this music / is this person interesting? And then the other question is like, can I help? Like, can I contribute to this? Because sometimes I'm not right either, So those are probably the two factors.
Your albums also span a lot of genres. Like you've got a septet album that's a little bit more classic. And then things like this latest soundtrack that are definitely more electronic. I think the last album is perhaps your most French cat burglar music sounding of your albums.
Agreed.
That's because they hired a real French cat burglar to participate. No.
The story does have cat burglar elements to it.
It definitely does. But like your very first album kind of does all of those things in one album. How do you feel like moving between those extremes?
When I sit down to write, I just let whatever comes out come out. And so there's no limits there, and I embrace that, and I'm actually like, I love that about younger generations too, people who are exposed to the internet since a young age. They don't care about genres at all. They because they've had access to music via streaming or however their whole lives. When I was a kid, Amoeba Records, for example, the jazz room was a whole nother annex, in the building. If you wanted to get a jazz record, you were in the jazz room, and like you weren't going to the other part of the store necessarily. So it was much more separate then. But I get excited when I hear music coming out today, because I feel like less and less people are honoring those genres.
We're speaking with John Carroll Kirby, who is playing at the Iron Horse tonight. I was reading in that same French Cat Burglar music article in The Guardian that they did about you, about how you're, in jam sessions with Kamasi Washington and with members of the Beastie Boys, but that it was really Solange who kind of like propelled you into the stratosphere of working with these artists as somebody who was a struggling artist, according to the article, and then, now a sought-after artist. Can you tell us a little bit about that story?
Yeah, I had about like $50 in my bank account when I got the call from Solange, and that really changed everything, because I think people had thought of me as a good sideman and maybe a good person to record keyboards in the studio, but she was the first one who ever like gave me a nod as a producer, and so that changed everything. And it's funny because it's just perception, I felt like I had that in me the whole time, but it wasn't until someone gave me an opportunity that things really started to change. So eternally grateful.
Khalees and I were also, spending the morning watching your really fun videos for Kirby's Gold, whereas I was mentioning,
I have to say, I love the content of them, but the intros make me smile every time.
Planet Earth. In a world known for only going skin deep, I try to find what's beneath the sand and the plastic. Who has magic? What are the sounds of a musical newspaper? Find out on Kirby's Gold. Worldwide.
It's a video series, and like I said, it's a little bit a la Anthony Bourdain.
There's a point where you poke at the ground.
You have your ear on the ground. Yeah, it's really fun.
And it just makes me happy.
It's quirky. There were these really short episodes, and they're meeting really interesting people who are doing interesting things, either musically or otherwise. Tell us about the decision to go and make that series, Kirby's Gold.
It comes from like a very mundane motivation, where essentially when I was releasing my first album with Stone's Throw, my PR agent was like, you got to come up with some content, basically. This was 2019, so even since then, it's even come a long way, where that's just assumed. But I was like, what do you mean content? I didn't, that like
I made an album.
That might not have even been a word then. And I was like, okay, well, how about this? And then got together with Ross Harris, who helped me create many of those episodes, and we just had fun, and we just kind of hit it off, and we were actually inspired by Anthony Bourdain, but also Huell Hauser, KCT, which was like and I mean this in the nicest way, he's just kind of like a professional talking nonsense schmoozer. I don't know what the word is, but I like that about him. I liked how casual it was, and I wanted to do something kind of like that. It's not as easy as it looks. Actually, he's a master for all the insults I just hurled at him. He's the best. He's really the best.
You meet all these interesting people who have all these other interesting either musical backgrounds or even visual artistic backgrounds and just improvise with them. So talk about bringing that to the table and how that has helped give you access to some of these huge musicians that we mentioned.
Yeah, I think growing up and being a jazz musician, being into jazz music, you have to learn how to improvise. And improvisation has been the basis of any collaboration that I've ever been a part of. I actually can't really read music. So when I'm writing with somebody, it always starts as a jam. Yeah, that's kind of everything. This is how I've got to where I am. That's how I start my own music. I kind of jam with myself or stuff like that. To me, it's the most fun way to do things.
How does that factor into doing scoring and collaborations too? Because, I mean, when you get ensembles together to do that sort of thing or to do your music, is it also mostly improvisation that happens?
It'll start as an improvisation, usually on my own. Like, so for example, for a score, I'll either sit by myself or with the director and kind of look at what's happening on the screen and then pluck something out on a keyboard and see what fits. And then step by step, and even more so these days with all the technology available, I'll kind of put in instruments temporarily filling the place of what later may become a real player who plays that instrument. So for drums, for example, I'm not really much of a drum programmer, so I'll mess around with all kinds of things like splice loops, if you know what that is, or pull the drums off a song I like, drop it in there, and that'll just be the temp until the time comes to work with a real drummer.
Is there anything that you learned on those sessions, those Kirby's Gold sessions, that really changed or altered how you approach your jam sessions and the music that you make?
When I did the first one with S.K. Kakraba, Master Gilles, like a kind of African xylophone musician, he's from Ghana. He kicked my ass. Like, I felt like I didn't know how to play music. I was like, oh, okay, I have no idea. Just rhythmically on a whole nother thing. That was a wake-up call and very humbling, and I'm sure it changed how I approach music, because you can think you're out and then you get in there with someone who is just levels above you, and you got to kind of rethink things.
You play panpipes.
I fake play panpipes. I play panpipes on my videos.
That's somehow better.
So are you really playing them? Because the first photo I saw of you was playing panpipes. And I was like, we should definitely talk to whoever this is.
Well, that's cool. I'm glad it got me the interview, but no, I'm BSing. I use, the panpipe player that I got for some of my soundtrack works, man, he looks the part. He's got the long hair.
Yeah.
He's got the flowy sash. Leave it to the pros. I don't play panpipes.
Have you heard of fluting? It is where somebody takes a recorder and plays it poorly over all of your favorite pop hits. I
have heard that.
It is delightful. Yeah. It is one of my most favorite things in the whole world. But
I think the Titanic theme, is that the most
that's one
popular?
Of them? Toto Africa is another classic one. Take on Me. But you mentioned your soundtrack work, and we mentioned that you've done the soundtrack to The Luckiest Man in America, which is the story of Press Your Luck, the Whammies show, which I love that, and you have a song about the Whammies. Were you a big fan of that show, and did it factor into how you're going to make a score to the movie?
I knew that show, and I always thought it was a very strange show. So yeah, when they approached me to do that, it was an instant and emphatic yes.
I do love that your music is so genre agnostic, but there is something very nostalgic sounding about your electronic music. Is it because everyone on this call is basically children of the 80s and we just kind of gravitate towards that? Or was that something that you went through other genres to come back and land upon?
I think with electronic music, for me, it's always come from a place of just not playing drums and not being a good drum programmer and not having resources, like just coming out of like, what can I make in my bedroom or in my studio by myself? When I make electronic sounding music, it's often kind of just like, okay, well, that sounded pretty good. I actually feel like I have not that much control over how it comes out, especially on the drum programming side. And in general, when I make music, a lot of times things I do just come out nostalgic. And I've tried to fight that and tried to do things that sound super modern, and it just doesn't really satisfy me. So I've come to accept that.
Although you're going to be headlining in Northampton, you're currently on tour with Khruangbin. Has being on tour with them been kind of influential, and have you been able to collaborate with them on making things? Because that pairing makes a lot of sense to me, and I'd be curious what would happen if we put all of you in a room to do things on the same stage.
Yeah, me and Marco been definitely throwing that idea out. We haven't gotten in the studio yet, but I hope to one day do that. And then, yeah, they've been letting us come up and sit in with them from time to time on stage. And that's been great. And man, watching them every night, like it's their whole set it's a whole ride. And I didn't quite get it exactly. It took me a few weeks to really understand it, but the whole thing is kind of building towards this end. And speaking of jamming, they're not jamming in the sense that it's fully free, but there's a lot of improvised parts, and it's all kind of working towards this big jam, like a Grateful Dead or a Fish thing. And when we played in New York at SPAC's, it's something Springs, something.
Yeah, it's Saratoga
Springs,
I think, right? Yeah,
Saratoga Springs, that's it. Which was like a famous Deadhead venue. It wasn't until we played there that it all kind of came together to me that like, oh, there's something of that, even though the notes aren't really the same, but there's something of that jam ethos here that they've tapped into, and that was really inspiring.
Somehow I love it when like Khruangbin and you do it, or like say Wilco does it. But when the Grateful Dead and Fish do it, it just hits different. Maybe it is that French cat burglar music, that 80s ethos and that sound that comes together. And I'm like, this is my sweet spot here.
I hear you. Yeah, I hear you.
Well, tonight at the Iron Horse, you can catch John Carroll Kirby. He'll be performing. He just did the score to The Luckiest Man in America. He's worked with Solange and Frank Ocean and Miley Cyrus and Tyler, the Creator, and so many more. And tonight he's going to play for you his French cat burglar music at the Iron Horse in Northampton.
It will be such a vibe.
Yeah, totally. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you guys. I'll see you there.
There's still tickets available for John Carroll Kirby's show at the Iron Horse this evening at the door. Find more information on their website. Performance begins at 7.
We'll get into the pages of our latest read for our summer reading week with local author Mattia Kramer's The Untended.
After we sprechen Sie words the English language has adopted from German with word nerd Emily Brewster.
You're listening to the Fabulous 413 on 88.5 NEPM.
The Fabulous 413 podcast is funded by Northeast Solar, helping customers make the switch to solar for savings, energy security, and tax incentives. Learn more at northeast-solar.com. The Fabulous 413 podcast is funded by the UMass 5 College Credit Union, dedicated to creating access to financial well-being for local people, businesses, and communities. Insured by NCUA, umass5.coop.
We're going to talk about some German words that we need because English can't do the job.
Right.
German's just so useful at Legoing itself together into whatever word you actually need for the thing.
Oh, we got to find that Instagram account that we always go to.
The one where the dude is teaching. He's like, today's word is testicle goblin.
I know.
Met someone, felt everything, shared a lot, but then it faded. No tragic, just over. In German, that's a Lebensabschnittsgefährte, a companion for a phase of life.
Emily Brewster, resident wordster from Merriam-Webster, our dictionary in Springfield. Today's segment has nothing to do with the fact that my son has been in Berlin for the last 3 weeks and will be there for another one. But maybe if he listens to it via the podcast, it will come in handy to him because German has made its way into the English language in so many helpful ways.
It's one of the three prongs of it, of the founding of the English language, really, I feel like.
I would argue that it's actually the base of the fork.
Yes.
Uh-huh. Do tell, Emily Brewster.
Well, German is or Germanic languages are the foundation of the English language.
Mm-hmm.
It's where our most basic vocabulary comes from, and it's where our grammatical structure comes from. Most of the German words, the German originating words in English, we don't even think of as being German. We think of them as being just English. You know, the German word for arm is arm. German word for finger is finger. And these words are house is house. There's so many words that are really indistinguishable, auditorily anyway, from the English word. But today I want to talk about some of the more recent German borrowings that English just can't do without. They're still recognizably German.
Like Farfignugan.
That pleasure of driving called Farfignugan.
Schadenfreude.
Schadenfreude, yes, that's a great one.
Making me feel glad that I'm not you.
That's not very nice, Gary.
Yeah, that's basically it, right?
Yes.
Schadenfreude, it comes from a German word, Schadenfreude, that in German, Schaden means damage, and Freude means joy.
German has such delightful words for things. And gosh, I wish that not just portmanteauing was the way that English could do it. It's every time I find out about one of these, it's like, I'm so glad that word exists.
The translation in English is a cool band name. Damage Joy.
Yeah.
It's like Joy Division.
Right, but darker.
It's like the new order of darkness. So Schadenfreude.
It refers to a feeling that we have sometimes when we see someone else's pain or punishment. For example, you see somebody like speeding through traffic and they're driving really obnoxiously, and then just a mile up ahead, you see them pulled over at the side of the road.
Literally happened to me on the way here today, so yes.
Did it really? And did you experience Schadenfreude?
100%. I gave a little toot-toot as I went by them.
The popularity of this word in the English language really owes something, as many words do, to The Simpsons. This word was mostly used among academics until the 1990s, when it was used in an episode of The Simpsons. In October 1991, Lisa explains to Homer what Schadenfreude is.
No, I do not know what Schadenfreude is. Please tell me, because I'm dying to know.
It's a German term for shameful joy, taking pleasure in the suffering of others.
Oh, come on, Lisa. I'm just glad to see him fall flat on his butt. He's usually all happy and comfortable and surrounded by loved ones, and it makes me feel... What's the opposite of that shameful joy thing of yours?
Sour grapes.
Boy, those Germans have a word for everything.
It's a perfectly cromulent word.
It is a perfectly cromulent word.
Which, if you've been following The Simpsons' impact on the English language, cromulent is a made-up word that The Simpsons made up that's now in the dictionary.
Yep.
Right, as is embiggen.
Which I use all the time. That one's just super helpful.
Yeah, it really is. What about Weltschmerz?
Weltschmerz?
Weltschmerz.
This one is new to me.
This one's new to me too.
Oh, it's spelled Weltschmerz. Schmerz means pain, and Welt means world. It's world pain or world weariness.
Oh, so perfect.
Weltschmerz.
I love it.
So, a feeling of sentimental sadness or pessimism might be described as Weltschmerz. Kind of just a feeling of weariness at the world.
Just everything going on in the news of the world, though. This isn't like a climate change word, necessarily.
Well, it predates that. This word first appeared in German in around 1827, kind of born out of Romanticism as an artistic movement.
Nothing more romantic than being depressed about the world.
That's
right.
Yes.
That's the theme of our summer reading book in some ways today, too. That we'll get to a little bit later, which talks about the novelization of the opioid crisis in Greenfield, Massachusetts.
Yes. Light subject matter.
Weltschmerz.
I love that.
Weltschmerz.
It sounds like something that you might be able to order at Lichter and Levin's Deli when they open on July 9th.
Would it be a deli meat?
It's like a schmear. Well, I'm glad to know that one. I haven't encountered that one in the wild yet.
But I'm going to use it now.
Weltschmerz.
Yeah. Do you want to hear a good recent quotation of it?
Please.
Yes.
Using it? This is from the AV Club. Werner Herzog, who understands more than just about anyone the terror of a cold and irrational universe, got some mileage out of making Nosferatu in 1979 by keeping what worked in the novel and in Murnau's 1922 film and leaning heavily into the vampire's Weltschmerz.
I love that.
I love this generation's love and gentle ribbing of Werner Herzog, just in general. Like, you've seen the account of Werner Herzog's clothing for beige children?
Yes.
Sad beige clothes for sad beige children.
But then also, I recently was exposed to a clip of a comic doing Werner Herzog as Spider-Man.
I am the hero that is here to stop your antics. Although, really, what is crime?
And then there's the famous Paul F. Tompkins doing Werner Herzog doing Yelp reviews.
Yes.
And then there's a clip of Werner Herzog listening to Paul F. Tompkins doing Yelp reviews.
Though the aisles are wide, it is impossible to avoid physical contact with your fellow shoppers. It is a grotesque parody of the bazaar at Marrakesh, as if dumb animals had been granted only the amount of sentience required to mock humanity. Be sure to get the dark chocolate peanut butter cups. They are right by the register.
How do you make of that?
Well, the accent could be better, but it's a very funny text.
He feels the world very deeply, and it's a beautiful, wonderful thing.
And then he shows up in The Mandalorian, and you're like,
why are you
this
here?
Is somehow perfect. I love Werner Herzog. Okay, so what's another German word that is making its way into English that we can still definitely perceive as very German, but is helping us explain ourselves better, more succinctly?
All right, are you ready?
Yes.
This one's a mouthful. Schwärmerei.
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 Schwärmerei?
Yeah.
Okay.
SCHWARMEREI. This refers to excessive and unbridled enthusiasm or sentiment. In German, this word has expanded from excessive enthusiasm and sentimentality to also refer to puppy love.
Schwärmerei.
Oh. And it comes from the word schwarmen, meaning to swarm. Originally, Schwärmerei in German referred to frenzied activity of bees swarming. But then it came to be like this emotional bee swarming.
The birds and the bees.
It is the German squee.
Yeah, I guess so.
And so much longer.
Because German.
And harder to say.
Schwärmerei.
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 The 7 Schwärmerei.
Oh, no.
The German version.
There's so much sentimentality in that one.
I love that one.
Yeah.
It's like a brewer and a sausage maker and a couple of cabbage farmers.
Yep, I love this. I love where this is going.
And someone with a Zweihammer.
We have to write this movie.
Yeah, and include this next word in it. The next word is doppelganger.
This
that one we know.
Amazing. I always think of Twin Peaks, which the entire mythos of Twin Peaks is based in the world of the doppelganger and even gets used in that quite frequently.
Yeah.
Doppelganger!
This word also has to do with the German Romantic movement of the late 1700s and early 1800s. There was a lot of German thought going on then that has had an impact on English speakers and on kind of nationally. I mean, that's also, I think, around the time that the word empathy, which we've talked about before, was coined also. But a doppelganger translates as double goer.
And for those who aren't familiar with it, the way that it's made its way into English, usually tell us what your definition of doppelganger is in Merriam-Webster's dictionary, Emily Brewster.
It's the spirit double of a living person, kind of its most simple sense. It can be a spirit that is thought to be a replica of a living person. And if you see this in German folklore, if you see your doppelganger, it means that you're going to die. But in English, we also use it to refer to someone who just looks a lot like another person. It's like, oh, I saw your doppelganger out on the street the other day.
I used to have one that lived in town.
Oh, yeah?
You did?
Yeah, actually, my previous partner mistook them on the street a couple of times for me.
Wow.
Wow.
My doppelganger is our director, Tony Dunn, who thankfully is on vacation this week because they think that we're each other all the time because we're bald.
And every time it happens, I am so delighted.
What would a black woman know about being mistook for somebody else? Chloe
Absolutely
Smith?
Nothing else. I would never, ever know anything about being mistaken for someone I definitely do not look like at all.
Yeah.
I have mentioned that on campus my freshman year, people called me that girl who looks like Tracy Chapman, right?
You don't look anything like Tracy Chapman.
I do not.
Except
You
for
really
the fact that you
don't.
happen to be a black woman.
With dreads who plays guitar.
Wow.
Hashtag not all bald men. There's also a great book, Doppelganger, that came out, I think, 2 years ago by Naomi Klein about how she's often mistaken in name and in some of their writings for Naomi Wolf.
I'm actually listening to that audiobook right now, and it's fantastic. I'm most of the way through. It's a great book.
I think
it's a really
so, too.
great book.
I love
mean,
it.
the confusion that people have between her and Naomi Wolf is just a really jumping off point for the book, which is really an examination of the phenomenon of doubling culturally also. So individuals have doppelgangers, but then so do political movements, and so do societies, and so do periods of time and history. It's a really, really great book.
I think so too. If you're Naomi B. Klein, you're fine. If you're Naomi B. Wolf, oof.
Exactly.
That was my big takeaway to remember which one is which from that book.
Yeah. No, that is helpful.
Also a really fun thriller from Richard Ayoade.
It's called Doppelganger?
Doppelganger.
Oh.
Jesse Eisenberg.
Oh, cool. I haven't seen that one.
Yeah.
Speaking of thrillers,
Yes.
the next word I have for you is the word poltergeist.
Yeah. Love that one.
Geist meaning ghost, which is also like we have in the word zeitgeist.
Yes.
Which is time ghost. Poltergeist. We define it as a noisy, usually mischievous ghost held to be responsible for unexplained noises, such as rappings.
Like Ghostface Killer.
Ghostface, catch the blast of a hype burst. My clock burst, leaving a hearse. I did work.
Yes, exactly.
The polter part comes from the German word poltern, meaning to knock. So it's like a knocking spirit.
That's scarier.
Knock, knock.
No, don't do it. But Zeitgeist is something that you mentioned as well, Emily Brewster, and that's one that I think that sometimes people, Poltergeist, there was a famous movie, so they get it, they know it has something to do with ghosts.
But Zeitgeist, I feel, gets misused sometimes.
Right. Zeitgeist is, we define it as the general intellectual, moral, and cultural climate of an era. It's a broadly applied concept. It's a useful concept, and maybe people do misuse it, but I think it also has just broad application. Zeitgeist can be about fashion. It can be about political movements. It can really cover a broad range of ideas.
The spirit of the age, I always think of it as, and a lot of times you can sense it in the music, you can sense it in all sorts of different things, and sometimes you don't perceive it until that era has ended, but who would have thought there was any fashion sense of the noughties, the 2000 to 2010, but you look at those pictures, you're like, damn, that looks dated. I thought that was yesterday.
I'm trying to think of what it is besides, like, basically My Chemical Romance.
Gonna clean up your looks with all the lies in the books.
I think we're aging ourselves in experiencing it that way,
And 50
though, right?
Cent.
Yeah.
The satirical newspaper, The Hard Times, I believe their headline from yesterday was, everything that you thought was 3 years ago was actually 8 years ago. And I was like, oh, damn it. That's the
I feel
zeitgeist
that.
for sure.
Hard Times calling us all out again.
Yeah.
Here's one that we no longer think of as German, and this is very much a part of our culture, the word kindergarten.
Ah, yeah.
Yeah. Kindergarten comes from the German word kinder, means children, and a garten means garden, children's garden.
That's where you grow your children.
It's not a tumor.
This isn't really related. When my husband and son and I were at the orthodontist's office to have a first consultation and whatever, and we walk into the room where all the chairs are and all these teenagers are lying back and there are people working over their mouths, and my husband walks in and he's like, oh, so this is where they make the teenagers.
There is a lot of truth to that.
Kindermacher.
Yeah, or teenager mocker. All right,
But
I
it
have
also
another German word, and this one is very short. Ooh. This one bucks the trend of long German words. This word is flack.
Wow, I didn't know that one was German.
Okay, yeah, this is a word brought to us by some wars that the Germans may have been involved in.
Oh, hey.
The really funny thing is that the origin of the word is actually, I'm going to try to say this. This is going to be, it is Fliegerabwehrkanonen. That's one word.
Yeah, it is.
No wonder they shortened it. Even the Germans need a good acronym now and again, apparently, because they shortened Fliegerabwehrkanonen to flak.
Tell us what the most common way the English speakers are using flak now.
I guess the most common meaning would be the criticism or opposition, like you catch flack for saying something or doing something, right? You get feedback that tells you are not doing something that people think is a good thing to do.
Mm-hmm.
But the earlier meaning is anti-aircraft guns, or the bursting shells fired from flak.
So you are catching verbal bullets.
This one's got 2 umlauts, which just gives it that extra German charm. Guterdammerung.
Guterdammerung.
Yeah. Basically means downfall. It can also mean specifically a collapse as of a society or regime marked by catastrophic violence and disorder.
Ew.
Guterdammerung. Yep. It translates literally, this is very charming, as twilight of the gods.
Ooh, Guterdammerung.
Dämmerung means twilight, and Gutter is the plural of God. Guterdammerung.
That may give us back to the first one we talked about, which is the one about the sadness about the global things.
Aww.
Right.
What was that one again? I should write these down.
Weltschmerz.
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 Werner Herzog and the Weltschmerz.
That's his band.
Yeah.
Thank you, Emily Brewster.
Thank you, Monty and Khalees.
Oh, this is always fun.
If you have a question for the Word Nerd, you can send it our way, thefab413@nepm.org.
I actually really like the German word for pregnant.
What is it?
Schwanger.
All the German words I know, I don't know if I should say on the radio or not.
You probably shouldn't.
I think my favorite German word might be the word for elbow.
What is
Ellenbogen.
it? Ellenbogen.
I taught my kids that one early on. And this is your Ellenbogen.
And now to take a stark look at the opioid crisis through a very real local lens in the new novel, The Untended by Mattia Kramer.
You're listening to The Fabulous 413 on 88.5 NEPM.
The Fabulous 413 podcast is funded by the Handle Factory Community Clay Studio in Shelburne Falls, offering summer youth clay and art camps and classes for adults. Learn more at handlefactory.com.
Welcome back to the Fabulous 413. Summer Reading Week continues with perhaps the most local of our books in that it is set in the very real city formerly known as the town of Greenfield.
The Untended follows a young mother as circumstances draw her further and further into an addiction to painkillers after an accident, but touches on our many societal perspectives on drug use and the many moments that drive our main character into ongoing relationships with them.
And with us is that book's author, Mattia Kramer, an American writer who often addresses the subjects of drugs, power, and powerlessness, and the voice inside your head. An Amherst College graduate, class of 2007, congratulations, who also has a master's in public policy. She's a former researcher and writer for National Priorities Project, the Northampton nonprofit that breaks down the complexities of the federal budget for organizations and individuals.
She's been published in The Guardian, The Nation, Mother Jones, Guernica, and The Washington Post. She's appeared on MSNBC and on radio stations across the country. The Untended is her first novel and has already won the 2025 American Fiction Award for Psychological Thriller. Thank you so much for coming in today.
And double congratulations.
I'm so delighted to be here. Thanks so much for having me.
It's interesting that it won for psychological thriller, I think, because this is not the kind of type of book I think of as a psychological thriller.
No, I would have thought of that as like the first book of our summer reading book. The setup, it seems much more on surface psychological, like classic psychological thriller.
Yes, but this is very like a real-time look, fictionalized, at what has been going on in the city of Greenfield and the greater Pioneer Valley and the country and in some cases the world as well. So talk about what was the spark that made you want to write a fiction piece about the town you grew up in?
Absolutely. So the Greenfield has been and was hard hit by the opioid crisis. And watching that happen in the town that I grew up in, I'm a fourth generation Kramer in Greenfield. My great-grandfather came to the town in the early 20th century. So seeing this chapter in Greenfield's history was significant to me. But in 2017, Greenfield signed on to lawsuits, a multi-district lawsuit against the pharmaceutical company. And that was like lit a light for me. I was so moved by the idea that Greenfield was joining forces with other cities and towns, states, tribal nations in order to try to hold these corporations accountable for the devastation and exploitation that they brought to our communities. So in 2017, I started researching, and it was in 2018 that I sat down and started writing. At that time, I thought it was going to be a legal thriller, which is funny now. I thought there's going to be like a lawyer character, and like I was like researching legal stuff. And almost as soon as I started writing, what became clear was that the heart of the story is not the lawsuits. It's nothing legal. The heart of the story is the people and their experiences.
Yeah, I mean, there is legal stuff in here, but it's not pertaining to any of the direct stuff with the pharmaceutical companies. It's tangential. It's
almost like they're like we experienced it watching it on TV or hearing about it in the news. You're hearing about these things happening in the midst of the crisis that human beings, are having to face day in and day out.
And that was exactly what I hoped to do, in the sense of showing those levels, like it's sort of happening out there. You hear about it on the news, and then you're also experiencing it in your own town, in your own home, in your own heart, and to try to include all of those different levels took me 8 years.
Why use fiction as opposed to doing this in a more journalistic way? And as a note, we had an irate listener who was accusing us of being non-journalistic if we don't mention the fact that CVS in Greenfield right now doesn't have these opioids available for some people who were prescribed for them because of the lawsuits, because of the history. That is not the intent
to the point where I
of
went
the
back
show.
to what I wrote and was like, did I include the word novel? I'm pretty sure I mentioned that this is fictional.
Yes.
I did.
So, listener, that is not the intent of this. We're talking about a book that is fictionalized about it. That does bring up some very real things. All that aside, why fiction?
Absolutely. Fiction can do things that journalism cannot. It does things that nonfiction just never can, and that is to bring you inside the minds and personal and very intimate experiences of other human beings. So to experience other people's interiority, that is a magic that can only happen on the fictional page. I was particularly interested with this book in bringing empathy to an area of our culture that is right now very heavy with stigma. And in my own personal experience, frankly, I move in social circles where people use recreational drugs. I am a person who uses drugs, and I always encounter a double standard in which if you are someone who has some money, is doing okay in life, and you use drugs, you're basically probably going to be okay. Not always, but probably. If you're someone who doesn't have dough and you're a person who uses drugs, you are so likely to be on the receiving end of societal judgment, stigma, shame very often, and social isolation. And I wanted to use fiction to bring empathy in a way that created a relatability. And truly, I think that everyone can relate to this experience. And guys, like just an hour ago, so I'm coming in here to do a live on air conversation with you. I know you guys do this every day. You're professionals. Listen, I'm a writer. That means every day I'm in a room alone with my computer. So I was uncomfortable. I'm like, oh, this is uncomfortable. And I'm like, isn't there a pill or something that can make this discomfort go away? And I think that that is a human sensation that everyone can relate to. If we're honest, everyone can relate to that. And that's what I wanted to bring, that relatability and then the empathy that comes behind it through fiction.
Can you talk about paralleling the journeys of your ostensibly two main characters, Topher and Cash? Because you've got Cash and their relationship with opioids and painkillers, and Topher, who is growing pot. So there's an interesting parallel between like looking at opiates and looking at the cannabis industry, or like the underground cannabis industry, in this book that I thought also was really interesting.
Yeah, I wanted to show all of these different angles in a way it I think and hope that it enhances the relatability. So cannabis is a drug that's now in the book is set before cannabis was legal. And so Topher has a clandestine grow operation on land that he does not own. And that's based on a very real grow operation here in New England. And that's one facet of the cannabis industry, whether licit or illicit. That's one facet of substance use, and one that's really relatable. And I think that it brought in questions of like, well, is he a bad guy? Is he a good guy? And then, of course, casting this huge shadow over the whole book is this gigantic for-profit legal pharmaceutical industry that is flooding towns with these extraordinarily addictive and powerful painkillers. So I was interested in how all of those pieces could fit together.
We're speaking with author Mattia Kramer about the new book, The Untended, which is part of our Summer Reading Week list. Let's take a little break, and we'll go back into the book and back into the city known as the town of Greenfield that is a major character in this new book.
You're listening to The Fabulous 413 on 88.5 NEPM.
Welcome back to the Fabulous 413. It is Summer Reading Week here, and we're speaking with author Mattia Kramer, who has her first fiction out called The Untended. It takes place predominantly in Greenfield, Massachusetts, and it chronicles the opioid crisis that is a very real crisis in Greenfield and beyond, but it is fiction. However,
your family's in it.
Your family's in it, which you reveal at the very end. But we won't reveal now because that might ruin things. So you think? Or do you want to reveal some things?
There are some cameos.
Yes.
My dad, who's no longer alive, makes a cameo. In the backdrop of Greenfield there's a scrapyard. In the book, it's called Kramer's Scrap. My family, my great-grandfather did open a scrapyard in Greenfield in the early 20th century. And there was I. Kramer and Sons, it was called, and was operated for the better part of a century in Greenfield.
Did they ask to be in it, or did it just fit to put little bits of your real family in this real place that you grew up?
This is a magical part of writing fiction. It just happened. It absolutely just came about organically, and it's like suddenly my dad was on the page. And I love that question, Khalees, because he's not alive and hasn't been for 20 years. And so maybe he did ask to be in it.
Yeah, and you get to bring him back in some ways, too, which is also a beautiful thing that writing and fiction can do. The book takes place at the beginning. It starts at Applebee's off of the Greenfield Rotary, which people know very well.
At the 99.
Oh, at the 99, right, not Applebee's, but on the other side of the Rotary. But then the directions are also very real, like you're going on Federal Street, or the Silversmith plays into it, the closing of the factory. All of this little bits of Greenfield lore factor into it. But the story of the main character, Cash, the mom, resonates as a real story too. How much of what goes on in the actual the conversations in the book about opioid addiction are culled from the headlines, and how much of it is in your imagination?
Well, I did a lot of research that was very interview-based. So I spent a lot of time talking with people about their very personal experiences, and I took it really seriously, the responsibility of trying to reflect it accurately on the page. And actually, one of the things that I set out to do in the early stages of writing this book was to do a kind of journalistic portrayal of what it means to be in the throes of this addiction. And yet to do it in a fictional format. And that was really challenging, and also I think ultimately has been really gratifying, because I think capturing that experience on the page, like as we were talking about earlier, that brings a sense of empathy that you just can't get through another means.
A lot of that also, there's a bit of Veterans Affairs in this as well, and collective PTSD. And I wonder if you found in the research, or a lot of instances of the research of this class struggle and PTSD, and how both of those connect to create crises of this nature.
Oh, absolutely. The layers of, I mean, this is what the title is intended to evoke. The untended. So much has been untended in the world that we live in. So many traumas buried. So many injustices unspoken. And this book just gestures at these major ghosts. And you're talking about the PTSD. So Topher, one of the main characters, is a veteran of the Afghanistan war, and you get to glimpse through his memory what it meant to be there. And actually, it feels incredibly timely. One of the things that he experiences trauma around is what he witnessed as the devaluing of Muslim lives. Mm-hmm. And that, I mean, that is the moment that we're in right now. And I think it's important, as a Jewish person, to me, it's important to say that out loud. We're seeing that with Gaza right now. And so all of these things are interwoven in a way that hopefully evokes that sense of trauma, and yet also hope through love and connection and community.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Oh no! If you see it with Cash and Russ too. You see it in Russ realizing where trauma is. It's just seeing those ripples. I thought was really beautifully done.
Yeah.
I know you're not working on another book, but do you think humanistic approaches to problems like this will change your look at public policy if you decide to return to public policy?
Definitely. And actually, I think they're one and the same. I think that if we're doing public policy right, then our hearts are in it, and that's what fiction is about. So this has already, so I actually am working in drug policy already, not, obviously not in a full-time capacity. I've been writing, but I am working with, in particular, a public health outfit that's based in Philadelphia, and that is just working tirelessly to bring human rights to healthcare and the criminal legal system, and which are so interbraided when we're talking about the opioid crisis. And so I would like to continue that work. And hopefully, and the funding environment is really relevant for that. So much funding has been cut for mental health services and substance use services. So I don't know what's going to happen with that. I don't know if I'm going to be able to continue to do that work or what it's going to look like, but I would like to.
Because the government was like, hey, no fentanyl, everything's fixed.
Oh, yeah. I love the angle, too, about, is this a retort to the opium wars? which is something I've never really heard put out there in the public sphere in a news sense or in a fiction sense too.
Right.
It's like an interesting, perhaps conspiracy theory, but perhaps not. You know what I mean?
There is a book called Fentanyl Inc. By Ben Westhoff, I think his name is. He's a journalist, and that's his beat. And he goes really, really deep into the fentanyl industry and this very thing about the extent that it can be known what China's intentions were.
Yeah.
And so it's not, I would say there is some journalistic backing to it. It's not a wanton conspiracy theory.
Yeah.
But I think understanding the historical context in China had an opportunity to beat the white man at his own game.
Yeah.
And I think that having some humility about like the American drug policy is a welcome notion.
I also loved how in the book it shows kind of how one note our recovery process is, or like how we deal with people who are attempting to break their addiction. There isn't as much nuance to it as there really should be, because there's clearly not an end-all be-all to helping folks with addiction. And I thought that was really not clever, but important to show too.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate the carefulness with which you both read. Yeah, someone who I work with at the Philadelphia organization that I mentioned, he is himself in recovery, and he's an MD, which I think makes it a really interesting combination.
Yeah.
And he's basically like, the prescription is love and connection. The prescription is community. The prescription is to not turn away from and isolate people who are in the throes of this really painful experience.
Mm-hmm.
And that is so missing from our national conversation, or even our local conversations. Like, so often the knee-jerk reaction is like, oh, well, they're even like they're an alcoholic. Like you keep them at an arm's length, as if that's not a situation like all hardships that it calls for love and like your people to be around you,
Yeah.
to show up for you.
It was really good. I like it a lot.
Yeah.
It wasn't as
Thank
hard
you.
for me to read as Cleese. I just was like, this is amazing.
Well, it's just like-
Thank you.
I live in Turner's. I have lost several people to opioids.
Yeah,
I
same.
also know many people who have made it through barely. You know what I mean? It's just,
I think it's like the combination of like having worked service jobs, knowing people who DCF has come in for,
that too.
where like it wasn't warranted,
Yeah.
it wasn't necessary, it was dumb busybodyism, like getting in the way of someone making something better for themselves and their families and creating much more havoc than would have been there before. A lot of that was very close to home, which made it a little bit harder to read.
I'm sorry for making you read a
No,
hard.
don't. This was a great
summer.
book.
The one reading that I've done, I actually at the Greenfield Public Library, I read that section, and there were, at the point where the social worker was like, "Can I look in the refrigerator?" There were audible gasps.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I was panicking during that.
Yeah.
You're rooting for her the whole time. She
Yeah.
is a heroine, which is ironic.
And part of actually what took me so long with this book, I would say, is she's also got a tough shell, like a tough exterior, because her life circumstances have been so tough.
Yeah.
And I had to write and rewrite so that you fall in love, like you see her and experience her wonderful qualities right up front,
Yeah.
so that you're rooting for her.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, there's no way you're going to stay in for this ride.
No.
Yeah. Yeah.
I love
Yeah.
it. I really do.
Yeah.
The other part of me that bummed me out a little bit, though, was that it was like, oh, it's Greenfield. Okay, here we are at 99. And like, oh, here's this street. And then I went into it totally blind. I didn't read the back of the book. I didn't know anything
Oh,
about
my
what it was
God.
about. And Cleese just kept saying, it's heavy. And then I was like, this is like when Anthony Bourdain came to town and everybody was excited that he was going to be talking about Hope and Olive's food or something like that. And then I was like, nope, we're here to talk about drugs, kids. I was like, oh,
Yeah. Yeah. I actually was thinking about that very thing today. Yeah, it is, because I also want to convey my love for the town.
I think that comes across.
Yeah, for
Good.
sure.
I
Yeah.
hope it does.
It's so beautiful. There was so many times I was like, this is like a contemporary Romeo and Juliet in some ways. It is a love story, really, but it's in these two different worlds amidst the opioid crisis, and it's called The Untended, as you mentioned, but it takes place prior to some big things that we have tended that gave me a little bit of hope for us as real human beings now, but made me feel so sad in the book, like community college is free now in Massachusetts. If community college was free for your main character in the book, it would have changed. It would have been a game changer.
Yes.
If cannabis was legal for your characters in the book, it would have been a game changer. And I think that gave me a little bit of hope in a book that is very sad, and I won't say it's a hard read, but it is
I will say it's a hard read.
Yeah, you kept telling me this. You kept warning me during the whole Green River Festival. This is a tough read. This is a tough read. I destroyed it. I read it faster than I think I've read any book in a really long time, and I stopped 30 pages before the end again so I wouldn't ruin anything, but I can't wait till the show's over so I can finish those last 30 pages.
I read through the end, and I needed the end, I will say, when we got to it. I won't say what happened, but I thought it was a really good, succinct, very ambiguous but good end to this book. So I hope that's giving enough information without giving too much information. It's hard not to ruin things.
Yeah. See, that's why I didn't read to the end. You've already won an American Fiction Award for this. What's next for you, Mattia Kramer?
Oh, my goodness. I don't know the answer to that is the honest answer. And, a lot of folks say, are you already working on your next book? And the answer is no, I'm not. And books are really hard. And I will write another one if I was possessed by this idea. I was so inspired, so in love with these characters. I still am. And if that happens again, I will write that book. And right now, I don't have a book that I'm working on, and I'm okay with that. I think I'm going to enjoy the summer, or try to.
You can read other people's books for summer reading.
Absolutely.
That's what we're doing, and we're having a great time doing it.
This was a great read, and very necessary, I feel like.
And the book, once again, is called The Untended. It is the first novel by Mattia Kramer, who is from Greenfield originally, lives in Amherst now, and paints a beautiful picture of a town in trouble that I think I said before, it gave me hope that we are maybe moving in the right direction, despite what may happen to the characters in the book itself. Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys. This was awesome.
Oh, our pleasure. On the next Fabulous 413 Summer Reading Week marches through an apple orchard to see a full exhibit of our next author, the very prolific Grace Lynn.
At the brand new walk through her work and career at the Eric Carle Museum, which includes art from her latest novel, The Gate, The Girl, and the Dragon.
And we'll hear more about her process and evolution as an author and illustrator, plus Congressman McGovern returns.
Yes, and if you've got a question for the Congressman, thefab413@nepm.org. I don't have any idea what you would want to ask about. There's nothing going on in politics right now.
At all.
I'm Monty Belmonte.
I'm Khalil Smith. We'll talk to you tomorrow on the Fabulous 413.